Hi, welcome to Coffee and Astronomy. I'm Jim Craig, and today I want to start the first of a three-part series on different kinds of telescopes. When you want to purchase a telescope, you're likely to encounter three different kinds, and I want to talk about a little of their history, their advantages, and their disadvantages. I'm going to start with the thing that started it all, and that is the refracting telescope. Now, the root word for refracting is the same as the root word for fracture. It means to break or to bend. And this is a scope with a lens on one end. The light goes through the lens and then gets bent, and then all the light rays get bent in a way that they come to a focal point, mostly. But first, a little history. There is question as to how the refracting telescope came to be. Usually credited for its discovery is a Dutch astronomer named Hans Lippershey, not astronomer, but a spectacle maker. And the story goes that there were children playing with discarded lenses outside of his shop, and he wanted to know what they were doing. And they showed him that if he held up two lenses of different focal lengths, that the clock tower across the square looked like it was closer. And Lippershey saw an opportunity here. He put them in a leather tube and sold them to the Dutch government because there was an advantage in warfare to seeing your opponent before your opponent saw you. They also became sort of playthings for rich people, as so many of these devices are. And one of the people who heard about this device, which was called the Quaker, which translates literally as looker, was an Italian astronomer, or an Italian physicist, scientist, all around, literally the Renaissance man, Galileo Galilei. And he got one of these devices sent to him, and he thought it was interesting, and he looked around Padua, Italy, which is where he was at the time. But then he realized that first it was limited, and he tried to figure out a way to improve it, to improve its magnification. And he ground his own lenses. He also did something that, well, I won't say nobody else had done it before. He pointed his telescope to things that he couldn't get closer to. Things up in the sky. He pointed it towards stars. He pointed it toward planets. He pointed it toward the moon. Now, he wasn't the first person to do this. About a year before he published his seminal work, The Starry Messenger, Sidereus Nuncius, a British naturalist had taken a look at the moon and drawn a very detailed map of the moon. A fellow by the name of James Harriot. And he drew this incredibly detailed map, far better than the maps that Galileo published in Sidereus Nuncius. Then he folded it, tucked it into a book where it languished for over 400 years, and Harriot was not credited with being the first person to do astronomy with a telescope. That honor goes to Galileo. Now, Galileo, of course, didn't like that name, so he took from the Greek the word teleos, meaning distance, and skopin, meaning to see, and made a distance seer and called it the telescope. And for about the next 30 years, it was the de facto way of doing astronomy. But there was a problem that existed and still exists to this day with refracting telescopes. And I'm going to do a supplementary video on optics that talks about in detail what the problem is. It's called chromatic aberration. The short version is different wavelengths, different colors of light don't all focus in the same place because some light gets bent more by the glass than others. There are ways around this, but you can never get rid of it entirely. So that's the first disadvantage to a refracting telescope. Now, somebody along the line discovered if you take like two pieces of glass that bend the light slightly differently, you can minimize this chromatic aberration. But it's still always there to at least some small extent. There was a way around it. That was Isaac Newton, and that will be the subject for the next video. One advantage to refracting telescopes is they're easy to set up and you don't have to collimate them once you have them. The collimation is usually done, if you buy one, the collimation is done by the manufacturer. And it's tested and retested and retested. And you can go back and watch my video on collimation of telescopes to find out why this is important. You want the center of the axis of that focus to be the center of where you're looking. If it's off one way or another, your stars are kind of weird shaped and the chromatic aberration really comes out. So that's one advantage. Also, they're usually pretty lightweight. One of the ways of overcoming chromatic aberration is also to make a very long focal length. And you'll generally find refractors have fairly long focal lengths compared to the same size reflecting telescopes. Christian Huygens built a telescope that had a lens that was 3 inches in diameter, but was over 50 feet long, very ungainly. But that's what he used when he discovered that the rings of Saturn were separate from the planet. To Galileo, Jupiter or Saturn just looked like it had bulges on the side of it, and he even joked that it looked like it had big ears sticking out. So refractors can be very long, but also very lightweight. The larger the diameter you make, the less light can make it through the glass because you have to make the glass thicker. In fact, there's actually a limit to where the glass is so heavy that it can't support its own weight on the edges. So you can only get a refractor up to a certain size. And every surface of glass has to be figured, properly polished and shaped. So if you use just like one lens, that has two surfaces that both have to be perfect. If you use a doublet, which is two lenses together, then you have to have 4 surfaces that are optically perfect. A triplet, you have 6, and so on and so forth. So you're going to pay for that. So for every inch of aperture, you're going to pay far, far more for a good refracting telescope than you are for a reflecting telescope of the same diameter. A 6-inch refractor is going to be thousands of dollars. The 6-inch reflector, the Newtonian type that I'll talk about next time, you can get for a couple $100. So yeah, there's a huge difference. Refractors have very good contrast, so they are excellent for planets. Some people use them for deep sky objects, nebulae, galaxies, and that sort of thing. Again, because that really nice contrast. There's no center obstruction that blocks any of the light. And you don't get what are called diffraction spikes. Again, that's going to be in my more detailed talk on optics. So they can be expensive, but again, easy to use. You don't have to collimate. Don't buy a cheap refractor. Usually, if you're looking at cheap refractors, you're looking at something that is sold in the same place that sells tires, toys, and towels, and you're not going to get a decent quality telescope. If you buy a good refractor, it's going to cost you. But it's also a scope that is going to last you for the rest of your life. Most telescopes will anyway, but a good refractor can. But be prepared to spend, a fair amount of money for a good refractor. But the big disadvantage is a chromatic aberration. With proper lenses and that sort of thing, you don't notice it that much, but it is still there. As I said, next time I'm going to talk about the Newtonian reflector, and that's the telescope that a lot of us have seen in movies and that sort of thing, with the eyepiece up near what you would think is the opposite end of where it should be. In fact, I did a video showing people using the Newtonian the wrong direction. You knew that it was pointing at the ground rather than up at the sky. That was in a nationwide advertising campaign. But I'm going to talk about it, again, its advantages and disadvantages. If you enjoy what you see here, you can help out by giving me a thumbs up or subscribing. That's down below. But you can also help me by becoming a patron by going over to patreon.com/planetofmystery. That's planet_of_mystery. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help me bring you these videos. You can get exclusive content that I make only for my patrons. You can be involved in giveaways. I do artwork that I share only with my patrons. Sometimes outtakes from some of these videos because, hey, I'm a human being. I'll trip over my tongue. That happens. And you also have access to me. I will answer your questions to the very best of my ability. If I don't have an answer, I will find an answer for you or help you find an answer. So again, please consider becoming a patron. So until next time, when we talk about Newtonian reflecting telescopes, this is Jim Craig with Coffee and Astronomy, and get out there and look up.